Hello there, and welcome. If you found your way here tonight, chances are you're looking for something to settle the mind, something soft and interesting to carry you gently away from whatever the day has left behind. And tonight, we're going to spend some time together in a very particular and beautiful corner of the natural world. Tonight, we're going to talk about butterflies. Now, you might think of butterflies as simple things, colourful wings, flutter past a garden flower on a warm afternoon. A creature so light it barely seems to touch the world at all. But beneath that delicate appearance, butterflies carry some of the most extraordinary stories in all of nature. Stories of transformation so complete they border on the miraculous. Stories of navigation across entire continents using nothing but sunlight and an internal compass. Stories of colour that isn't quite colour, of sight that stretches into wavelengths no human eye can reach, of creatures that live only a few weeks and yet somehow, improbably, find a way to matter enormously. There is something deeply human about our love for butterflies. They've appeared in the myths and dreams of people all over the world for as long as anyone can remember. In ancient Greece, the word for butterfly psyche was the same word used for the soul. In Japan, they are symbols of joy and longevity. In Mexico, the arrival of millions of monarch butterflies each autumn has been understood for centuries as the return of the spirits of ancestors, coming home for the Day of the Dead. Even in our everyday language, we carry butterflies with us. We feel them in our stomach when we're nervous. We chase them metaphorically when we chase beauty or happiness or something just beyond our reach. So tonight we're going to follow them, slowly, gently, without any hurry at all. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. Before we begin, I'd like to invite you to settle in a little more completely. Let your shoulders drop if they've been holding on to anything. Let your jaw soften. Take one easy breath in and let it go slowly. There is absolutely nothing you need to do right now. Nothing to remember, nothing to solve. Just this voice and the quiet world of butterflies opening slowly before you like wings in the morning sun. Let's begin. Butterflies belong to the order Lepidoptera, a name that means, in its ancient Greek roots, scaly wings. It's a beautiful and precise description, though you'd need to look quite closely to see what it refers to. The wings of a butterfly, which seem from a distance to be painted in solid sweeps of colour, are actually covered in thousands upon thousands of tiny scales. Each one is so small that you can barely see it with the naked eye. They overlap like roof tiles, or like the feathers of a very small and very quiet bird, and together they create something that no human craftsman has ever quite been able to replicate: surfaces that catch light in ways that feel alive, colours that shift and shimmer and seem almost to breathe. There are roughly 20,000 species of butterfly in the world, 20,000 distinct expressions of the same basic body plan: 2 pairs of wings, 6 legs, a pair of antennae, a long coiled tongue called a proboscis. And yet every single one of them is recognisably itself. The enormous blue morpho of the South American rainforest, with wings the size of your outstretched hand. The tiny western pygmy blue of North America, smaller than your thumbnail. The ornate birdwing butterflies of Papua New Guinea, whose wingspans can reach nearly a foot across. The common cabbage white, modest and pale, fluttering over suburban gardens and farm fields and roadsides the world over. Each of them is a masterpiece of adaptation. Each of them has spent millions of years becoming exactly what it is, and we're going to spend tonight learning about all of them. Or at least, as many as we can gently explore together. Butterflies and moths together make up the order Lepidoptera, and scientists believe this ancient lineage of insects first appeared on Earth somewhere around 200 million years ago. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. 200 million years. The dinosaurs, who so capture our imagination, first appeared around 230 million years ago, which means that butterflies, or at least their distant ancestors, the early moths, were already here, already alive, already making their quiet way through the ferns and primitive forests, when the very first dinosaurs took their first uncertain steps. Butterflies outlasted the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. They survived ice ages and shifting continents and the slow rise and fall of entire ecosystems. They are, in the most literal sense, survivors of almost unimaginable scale. What is astonishing is how well they've done it, They have not, like the shark or the crocodile, survived by being fierce or armoured or invulnerable. They have survived by being adaptable, by being small enough to hide, by being numerous enough that no single catastrophe could wipe them all out, and by entering over millions of years into one of the most elegant partnerships in the history of life on Earth, the partnership with flowering plants. Butterflies and flowers evolve together. The word for this in biology is coevolution, and it describes something truly extraordinary, the way two entirely different kinds of living things can, over enormous stretches of time, shape each other. Flowers evolved colours and patterns and nectars that attract butterflies. Butterflies evolved proboscises long enough to reach into flowers, bodies light enough not to damage the petals, and behaviours that led them to visit flower after flower after flower. In return for their sipping of nectar, butterflies carry pollen on their bodies from plant to plant, allowing the flowers to reproduce. It is a transaction so elegant, so mutually beneficial, that it has persisted for tens of millions of years, and from it, the world has grown more beautiful. The life cycle of a butterfly is one of the most extraordinary things in all of nature, and it begins, as all extraordinary things do, in a very small way. It begins with an egg. A butterfly egg is almost impossibly small, usually smaller than the head of a pin, but even at that scale it is a work of extraordinary complexity. Under a microscope, butterfly eggs reveal themselves to be intricately sculpted, ribbed and patterned in ways that seem almost architectural. Each species has its own distinct egg shape, some round, some oval, some ridged like tiny melons, some shaped like tiny crowns. The variations are astonishing, and they exist for reasons that biologists are still working to understand fully. The mother butterfly doesn't choose where to lay her eggs carelessly. She's remarkably selective. She will fly from plant to plant, tasting the leaves with chemical receptors on the pads of her feet, testing for exactly the right species. Monarch butterflies, famously, will lay their eggs only on milkweed. The caterpillars that hatch will eat nothing else. The mother is essentially choosing the entire world her children will inhabit for the first weeks of their lives, and she does so with extraordinary precision. The egg hatches in a matter of days, sometimes just 3 or 4 in warm weather, and out comes a caterpillar, or to use the more technical term, a larva. And here is where things become truly remarkable. A caterpillar is, in essence, an eating machine. From the moment it hatches, it has one consuming purpose: to eat and to grow, and it does this with single-minded efficiency that is hard not to admire. A caterpillar can increase its body weight by as much as 100 times in just a few weeks. Think about what that would mean for a human being, a newborn baby growing in a matter of weeks to the size of a small car. The rate of growth is almost violent in its intensity, though the caterpillar itself goes about it with perfect calm. To accommodate this growth, a caterpillar must shed its skin, its exoskeleton, multiple times. Each shedding is called a molt, and after each molt a caterpillar emerges slightly larger, sometimes in a slightly different colour or pattern. The stages between molts are called instars. Most butterfly caterpillars go through 5 instars before they are ready for what comes next. Caterpillars have evolved an astonishing variety of appearances. Some are brilliant green, designed to disappear against the leaves they eat. Some are striped and bright, advertising to potential predators that they are toxic or taste terrible, a warning coloration that works because predators learn, over time, to associate those colours with an unpleasant experience. Some caterpillars have markings that look remarkably like the eyes of a much larger animal, startling a bird just long enough for the caterpillar to escape. Some have elaborate spines or hairs that are irritating or even mildly venomous to touch. All of this cleverness, all of this evolutionary ingenuity is in service of one goal: surviving long enough to transform. And then comes the chrysalis. The caterpillar, when it has eaten enough and grown enough, performs one of the most dramatic acts in all of nature. It attaches itself to a branch or a leaf, hangs from it in a particular way, and sheds its final skin one last time, revealing beneath that skin not a larger caterpillar, but something entirely different. Something smooth and still and sealed, shaped like a small pod or a jewel, a chrysalis. From the outside, the chrysalis looks still. It looks, if you're honest, like nothing much is happening at all. It might hang there for a week or 2 weeks, or in some species all winter long, and yet inside, something is happening that borders on the impossible. The caterpillar, once inside the chrysalis, essentially dissolves itself. This is not a metaphor. This is what actually happens. The caterpillar's body breaks down into what scientists call imaginal soup, a liquid rich in nutrients and cellular material, the biological equivalent of a blank canvas. Almost everything the caterpillar was ceases to exist, and from that dissolution, from that complete letting go of what was, something entirely new is assembled. The butterfly is built from scratch. Wings that never existed before are grown. A completely new mouth, the coiled proboscis, replaces the chewing mouthparts of the caterpillar. New eyes, new antennae, an entirely restructured body plan. The 6 legs are still there technically, but even they are reorganized and renewed. The creature that will emerge has almost nothing in common, structurally, with the creature that went in. It is one of the few examples in nature of an organism genuinely becoming something else. Not just growing, not just maturing, truly, completely, radically transforming. There is something worth pausing on here, in this idea of transformation. It is worth pausing here for a moment and letting this image settle. A creature dissolves completely. It ceases, in a very real biological sense, to be what it was. And from that dissolution, something more beautiful, something more free, something more capable of soaring emerges. Biologists call the butterfly the imago, which is the Latin word for image or copy. But also interestingly, it's the root of the word imagine. There's something quietly profound in that. Whatever the day has left behind, whatever thoughts are still moving through your mind right now, you might let them soften a little. Let them dissolve, perhaps, just a little. You don't have to hold them. They'll be there if you need them. But for now, there is only this gentle story, and the sound of these words, and whatever space you've made for yourself tonight. The moment of emergence is called eclosion, and it is one of the most beautiful things a person can watch. The chrysalis, which has perhaps been dark and still for weeks, begins very slowly to become transparent. You can see, if you're watching closely, the outline of wings folded inside, and then, carefully, the butterfly begins to push its way out through a small opening at the top. It's a slow process. It takes time, and that slowness is not a weakness, it's necessary. As the butterfly pushes through that narrow opening, fluid is forced from its body into its wings, inflating them, straightening the delicate veins that will give them their structure. A butterfly helped to emerge from its chrysalis by a well-meaning person who cuts open the casing to make it easier, will often fail to inflate its wings properly. It needs the resistance. It needs the effort. The struggle is part of the process. Once it's out, the butterfly hangs still for a while, its wings soft and crumpled, drying slowly in whatever breeze is present. It pumps fluid through its wing veins methodically, patiently, and then, when the wings are ready, it flies. For the first time in its life, it leaves the earth. A butterfly's wings are, to put it simply, extraordinary. We've mentioned the scales already, those tiny overlapping tiles that cover every wing surface. But the story of butterfly wing colour is more complicated and more interesting than it might first appear, because not all butterfly colour works the same way. Some butterfly colours come from pigments' actual chemical compounds embedded in the wing scales that absorb certain wavelengths of light and reflect others. This is how most colours in nature work. The orange of a monarch butterfly, for example, comes largely from flavonoid pigments derived from the milkweed the caterpillar ate. The yellow of a sulfur butterfly comes from related compounds called pterins. But some butterfly colours are something else entirely. They are structural colours, colours that aren't produced by pigment at all, but by the physical structure of the scales themselves. The wings of the blue morpho butterfly, that magnificent creature of the South American rainforest, appear an almost electric blue-green that seems to glow from within. But there is no blue pigment in a morpho's wing, none at all. What creates that colour is the microscopic architecture of the wing scales, layers of curved ridges, spaced at exactly the right intervals, so that when light hits them it interferes with itself in a way that amplifies blue wavelengths and cancels out others. The colour is created entirely by physics. And here is something wonderful about that. Because the colour is structural, it never fades. A morpho butterfly pinned in a museum collection 200 years ago still looks as vivid and electric as the day it died. The blue doesn't age because there's no pigment to break down. It's built into the geometry of the material itself. Engineers and materials scientists have spent years trying to understand and replicate this effect, and they found applications in everything from cosmetics to anti-counterfeiting technologies to the design of solar panels. The butterfly solved an optical engineering problem, elegantly and completely, long before any human engineer knew the problem existed. Butterflies see the world very differently from the way we do. Human eyes can perceive a relatively narrow range of light wavelengths, from deep red through orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. But butterfly eyes extend well beyond our range, into the ultraviolet wavelengths of light that are completely invisible to us. And in the ultraviolet, the world looks entirely different. Many flowers that appear plain to us white or yellow reveal elaborate patterns in ultraviolet light. Guides, lines, dots, circles that direct a butterfly straight toward the nectar at the flower's center. They are landing strips, essentially, visible only to eyes equipped to see them. A bee or butterfly landing on a flower is not landing randomly, it's following a map. And butterflies themselves have ultraviolet markings on their wings that are invisible to us, but clearly visible to other butterflies. A wing that looks uniformly yellow to a human eye might, in ultraviolet, carry patterns of extraordinary complexity markings that identify the butterfly species, its sex, perhaps even its health, a whole dimension of visual communication happening just beyond what we can see. It's a gentle reminder, and a rather humbling one, that our perception of the world is not the world. The universe is fuller than we can see. There are colours we can't name, patterns we can't perceive, conversations happening all around us in wavelengths our eyes simply weren't built to receive. Butterflies taste with their feet. This might sound like a joke, but it is entirely and factually true. On the ends of a butterfly's legs are chemical sensors called chemoreceptors that are capable of detecting the chemical composition of whatever surface the butterfly lands on. When a butterfly lands on a leaf, it is, in a very real sense, tasting it. This ability is critically important for female butterflies choosing where to lay their eggs. By landing on a plant and tasting it, she can determine not just whether this is the right species, but whether this individual plant is healthy, whether it has been affected by disease or drought, whether it will provide adequate nutrition for the caterpillars she is about to bring into the world. The sensitivity of these foot sensors is remarkable. Butterflies can detect sugars in concentrations far lower than the human tongue could register. There is something almost tender about this image, a butterfly settling on a leaf in a sunlit garden seeming, to any observer, to simply be resting. But in those few moments of stillness, she's making decisions of enormous consequence, reading the chemistry of the plant beneath her feet with a precision that outperforms any laboratory instrument of a century ago. The butterfly's proboscis, that long, coiled tongue, is another marvel of design. When it's not in use, the proboscis is coiled tightly against the butterfly's head, like a watch spring, invisible unless you look closely. When it's time to feed, it uncoils smoothly and extends down into a flower, reaching for the nectar at the base. In some species, particularly those that have co-evolved with specific deep-tube flowers, the proboscis can be extraordinarily long. Darwin famously predicted the existence of a specific moth with a proboscis 11 inches long, based entirely on the fact that he had found an orchid in Madagascar with a nectary 11 inches deep. The moth was discovered 41 years after his death, exactly as he predicted. Butterflies don't just drink nectar with their proboscis, they also drink water, which they gather from damp soil, wet sand, or shallow puddles in a behaviour called puddling. If you've ever seen a group of butterflies gathered at the edge of a muddy puddle or a damp patch of sand, you've seen puddling in action. And they're not just drinking water, they're extracting dissolved minerals and salts that are scarce in their nectar diet. Some butterflies will puddle on animal dung, on carrion, even on perspiring human skin, for the same reason. They need salts, and they find them wherever they can. There's also a quieter, more intimate feeding behaviour that butterflies engage in, drinking tears. Certain butterflies have been observed landing on the closed eyes of sleeping or resting animals, turtles, caimans, birds, and drinking the moisture from the corners of their eyes. The tears contain salt and protein. The animals, for their part, seem entirely unbothered. It is, in its small way, one of the most extraordinary instances of creatures sharing resources across the enormous distance between species. If you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. You're welcome here for as long as you need. And if your eyes are growing heavy now, let them close whenever they're ready. The story will carry on around you, softly, like a voice in the next room. You don't need to follow every word. Just let it be there like company. Butterfly migration is one of the great wonders of the natural world, and no species demonstrates it more magnificently than the monarch butterfly. Each autumn, millions of monarch butterflies across eastern North America, from as far north as Canada, across the entire sweep of the United States, begin a journey south. They fly in their delicate orange and black wings up to 3,000 miles to reach a handful of specific mountain forests in central Mexico, specifically to a place called the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve in the state of Michoacán, where they will overwinter in the Oyamel fir forest that cling to the high slopes. The scale of this migration is breathtaking. When the monarchs arrive in Mexico, they cover entire trees. Branches that should be bare brown and green are instead wrapped in an orange blanket of wings. The sound of millions of butterflies in one place has been described as a kind of sustained, papery rustling, like rain on dried leaves. The trees bow slightly under the weight of them. What makes this migration particularly astonishing is that no individual butterfly makes the round trip. The monarchs that arrive in Mexico in November have never been to Mexico before. Their parents never made it to Mexico either. It may take 3 or 4 generations to complete the northward journey in spring, and only one, a special longer-lived generation called the super generation, makes the entire southward trip in autumn. These super generation monarchs live 8 or 9 months, far longer than the 2 to 5 week lifespan of the summer generations. And somehow, without having ever travelled the route before, without a parent or experienced companion to follow, they navigate to precisely the right forest, on precisely the right mountain, in precisely the right corner of Mexico. How they do this is one of the most captivating mysteries in all of animal navigation. Scientists now believe they use a time-compensated sun compass essentially. They track the position of the sun and correct for the time of day, which tells them which direction is southwest. This internal clock, this biological GPS, is tuned over millions of years of evolution. But the sun compass alone doesn't entirely explain the precision of their navigation. There is also evidence that monarchs may sense the Earth's magnetic field, using it as a kind of backup system when the sun is obscured by clouds. The monarchs don't know they're doing something extraordinary. They simply fly with quiet purpose toward warmth, and they find it. The monarch migration is not the only remarkable butterfly journey. The painted lady butterfly holds the record for the longest confirmed butterfly migration of any species. These small rust and white butterflies have been tracked making a remarkable journey from sub-Saharan Africa northward to Europe, a trip of around 7,500 miles in total, across the Sahara Desert, up through Europe, and back again. The journey, one way, can span across 12,000 kilometers of open ocean, desert, and continent. What makes this particularly extraordinary is that, like the monarch, no individual painted lady completes the full round trip. The journey takes multiple generations. Scientists pieced this together by examining the chemical signatures called isotope ratios in the wings of painted ladies caught in Europe, which bore the chemical fingerprints of the plants growing in sub-Saharan Africa. It's a kind of molecular archaeology. Reading the history of a creature's travels in the chemistry of its wings. The fact that we've only recently confirmed this migration, largely because the butterflies travel at high altitude, invisible to the naked eye below, is a reminder of how much still waits to be discovered about even the most familiar parts of the natural world. Butterflies navigate not just across continents, but through time. The monarchs that arrive in Mexico in late autumn must survive through winter several months without the flowering plants they need to feed on. They survive in a state of reproductive dormancy called diapause, clustering in the trees, nearly still, their metabolism slowed to a kind of hibernation pace. When the days begin to lengthen in late winter, something shifts inside them. Their internal clocks register the change in the quality of the light, and they begin to stir. They mate, then begin the slow journey north and east, the females pausing to lay eggs on the milkweed they find along the way before they die. The timing of all of this is extraordinarily precise. Monarchs that arrive in their northern summer breeding grounds too early may find no milkweed yet sprouted, too late, and they may not have time to complete enough generations before autumn closes in again. The entire cycle, tens of millions of butterflies, moving in synchrony across a continent, is orchestrated by the length of the day, the angle of the sun, and the ancient instructions written in their genes. We talk sometimes about being in sync with the natural world, and usually we mean it in a loose, poetic sense. But the monarch butterfly is literally synchronized with the turning of the Earth. Its life is shaped at every moment by the planet's tilt and its orbit around the sun. There is something deeply calming about that, the reminder that we too live on a planet that is moving, tilting, turning reliably in its ancient patterns. Some butterflies live for only a few days. The male Queen Alexandra's birdwing, the world's largest butterfly species, may live for no more than a week or two. The small copper butterfly, common across Europe and Asia, has a lifespan of just a week in its adult form. And yet, in that week, it will mate, and the female will lay her eggs, and the species will continue. Life, at these scales, operates with an efficiency and a sense of purpose that has nothing to do with how long it lasts. There is a quietly radical idea in that. We measure our lives in decades and count them as long or short, meaningful or cut short. But a butterfly that lives a single week has still, in every biological sense, completed a life. It has done what it came to do. It has seen the sun, tasted flowers, been alive in the warm air of summer. The Japanese word mono no aware, a phrase that doesn't translate simply into English, describes a gentle, bittersweet awareness of impermanence. The sense that things are more beautiful because they don't last. Cherry blossoms are the classic example. They bloom for less than 2 weeks, and it is precisely their brevity that makes their beauty feel unbearable in the best way. Butterflies are a kind of living embodiment of mono no aware. They are so beautiful, and they are here for such a short time, and perhaps that is part of why we love them. And yet some butterflies live remarkably long lives for insects. The morning cloak butterfly, a species found across North America and Europe, can live up to 11 months in its adult form, one of the longest lifespans of any butterfly species. It achieves this by spending much of the cold months in hibernation beneath bark or in hollow trees, emerging on warm days to feed on tree sap and fruit, then retreating again. Morning cloaks are often the first butterflies seen in spring in temperate climates, sometimes appearing when patches of snow are still visible on the ground, looking for all the world like they've simply stepped out to check whether winter is truly over. The brimstone butterfly of Europe and Asia is similarly long-lived, overwintering as an adult in ivy or holly leaves that provide just enough shelter and camouflage. The brimstone's leaf green colouring makes it nearly invisible among the waxy leaves of an evergreen shrub. These are butterflies that have learned, in an evolutionary sense, to take the long view, to hunker down, to conserve their energy, to wait for the world to grow warm again. There is patience in that feels almost like wisdom. Butterflies are found on every continent except Antarctica. They have colonized habitats ranging from tropical rainforests, where the greatest diversity of species is found, to high mountain meadows, Arctic tundra, coastal dunes, dry desert scrublands and suburban parks. Wherever there are flowering plants and sufficient warmth for at least part of the year, butterflies have found a way to be there. The diversity in tropical regions is staggering. The Amazon basin alone is home to more butterfly species than exist in all of North America and Europe combined. In parts of Peru or Costa Rica, a careful observer could find hundreds of species in a single day's walk through the forest, each one occupying a slightly different ecological niche, feeding on different plants, active at different times of day, occupying different layers of the forest canopy. This richness is connected to the extraordinary diversity of the tropical forest itself. In a mature rainforest, every species of tree may play host to dozens of specific butterfly species whose caterpillars eat only its leaves. The butterflies, in turn, pollinate the forest flowers and provide food for birds, bats, frogs, and spiders. Remove the butterflies, and the whole intricate web would begin to unravel. They are not just beautiful visitors to the forest. They are, in a real sense, part of its structure. There is a phenomenon called Batesian mimicry that reveals just how sophisticated butterfly evolution has become. It works like this. Some butterflies are toxic. They've accumulated chemical compounds from the plants their caterpillars ate that make them taste terrible or even dangerous to predators. Birds learn, after an unpleasant experience or two, to avoid these species. The viceroy butterfly of North America, for example, resembles the monarch closely in colour and pattern, and for a long time it was assumed this was a case of Batesian mimicry, the viceroy mimicking the toxic monarch to protect itself. But more recent research has complicated this picture beautifully. It turns out viceroys are also somewhat unpalatable to birds. On their own account, they have their own chemical defences, so the resemblance between viceroy and monarch may be more mutual than it first appeared, each species' warning coloration reinforcing the others. This is called Müllerian mimicry, and it's found throughout the butterfly world, multiple species that are each independently toxic converging on similar warning colours, so that birds have to learn fewer lessons to understand that orange and black or red and black means don't eat this. The mimicry extends to behaviour as well. Some non-toxic butterfly species don't just look like toxic ones, they also fly in the same slow, unhurried way. Toxic butterflies can afford to fly lazily, conspicuously, as if they have nothing to worry about. Because they don't. A predator looking at them knows it's not worth the trouble. Non-toxic mimics imitating this confident, slow flight borrow the protection without the chemistry. It's an elegant deception, a costume and a performance chosen by evolution rather than by intention, but no less remarkable for that. The relationship between butterflies and ants is one of the more unexpected stories in the natural world. Many species of blue butterfly, a large family called the Lycaenidae, have evolved an extraordinary connection with certain species of ants. The caterpillars of these butterflies produce chemical secretions from a special gland on their backs that closely mimic the chemical signals ants use to communicate with their young. The ants reading these chemical signals respond as if the caterpillar were one of their own larvae they carried into the nest. They feed it, they protect it from predators, and the caterpillar, safe inside the ant nest, exploits this hospitality in ways that range from the merely opportunistic to the outright parasitic. Some species simply eat the food that ants bring for their own larvae. Others go further, they eat the ant larvae themselves, while continuing to produce the chemical signals that tell the ants everything is fine. This relationship between the large blue butterfly and the Myrmica ant species was one of the most complex and closely studied examples of this phenomenon, and it led to one of the great conservation success stories in British natural history. The large blue became extinct in Britain in 1979, largely because changes in grassland management allowed the grass to grow too tall, which eliminated the Myrmica ants the butterflies depended on. After years of research, conservationists were able to restore the right type of short-grazed grassland the ants returned, and with them, through a careful reintroduction program using Swedish populations, the large blue came back. It now breeds again in England. It is a hopeful story, a story about paying attention, about understanding the invisible connections that hold an ecosystem together, and about what becomes possible when that understanding is applied with patience and care. Allow your breathing to find its own slow rhythm as we continue. There is nothing urgent here. We are moving through these stories gently, one by one, like pages turning in the half-dark. If you've lost the thread somewhere, that's fine. Just let the sound of the words continue, and rest. Butterfly wings are not just beautiful. They're also remarkably efficient structures for flight. A butterfly's wing is, in engineering terms, a flexible, thin membrane supported by a network of hollow veins, the same veins that are inflated with fluid when the butterfly first emerges from its chrysalis. The wing is essentially a series of cells, each one bounded by veins on all sides, and the arrangement of these cells varies between species in ways that affect the aerodynamic properties of the wing. Butterflies don't fly the way most people imagine. They don't flap their wings up and down in a simple bird-like motion. Instead, they perform a complex clapping and fling motion at the top of each wing beat, and a dragging motion at the bottom that generates not just lift, but also rotational forces that make their flight far more maneuverable than it appears. The seemingly random, erratic flight path of many butterflies is actually a sophisticated evasive tactic. A path designed, through millions of years of predation pressure, to be as unpredictable as possible to a pursuing bird. Some butterflies, particularly larger species like the swallowtails, can achieve impressive speeds when they want to up to 12 miles per hour in straight-line flight. Others, like the white admiral, are skilled gliders, capable of travelling long distances on motionless wings, riding thermal currents with the casual ease of a hawk. And the painted lady, as we've noted, can migrate thousands of miles on those seemingly fragile wings. The colours of butterfly wings serve many purposes beyond simple beauty. We've talked about warning coloration, the reds and oranges and blacks that signal toxicity to predators, but wings also carry camouflage, and butterfly camouflage can be extraordinary in its subtlety and precision. The Indian leaf butterfly, also known rather unimaginatively but accurately as the dead leaf butterfly, is perhaps the most remarkable example. When it lands and closes its wings, it looks, with almost uncanny precision, like a dead, dried leaf. The wing shape, the pattern of veins, the variation in colour from brown to tan to the occasional spot that mimics a patch of fungal damage or a small hole, all of it combines to create an illusion that fools not just casual observers, but experienced naturalists who know exactly what they're looking for. This butterfly has been studied and admired for 200 years, and it still astonishes. The oak leaf butterfly of Asia achieves a similar effect. Its upper wings, visible in flight, are vivid orange and iridescent blue, vivid enough to attract a mate or dazzle a predator for a split second. But the moment it lands and closes those wings, it disappears entirely into the leaf litter. The duality is striking, an extravagance of colour that switches off completely, replaced by perfect invisibility in a single motion. The common butterfly of Europe and North America has wings whose ragged, irregular edges serve the same purpose. They break up the characteristic smooth outline of a wing and make the resting butterfly look convincingly like a torn, weathered leaf. The comma in its name refers to a small white mark on the underwing, a single pale curve, like a punctuation mark floating in a field of brown. Eye spots are another extraordinary feature of butterfly wing design. Many species carry on their hindwings a pair of large, circular markings, rings of colour arranged around a central dark spot that closely resemble the eyes of a much larger animal. The peacock butterfly of Europe has enormous, vivid eye spots on all four wings that, when the butterfly suddenly opens them, closely resemble the face of an owl. The startled display is so effective that it causes birds to flinch backward. A split second of confusion can be enough to escape. What's fascinating about eye spots is the way they work, or rather, the many different ways different species have evolved to use them. Some are flash displays hidden until needed, then revealed suddenly. Others are apparently effective because they draw a predator's attack toward the wing edge, rather than the body birds learn to strike at what looks like an eye, and a beak mark in the edge of a wing is survivable in a way that a beak mark through the thorax is not. Many museum butterfly specimens show exactly this kind of damage, a neat notch taken out of the wing near an eye spot, the butterfly having escaped with its life and only a torn wing. The intelligence that went into designing these patterns belongs not to any individual butterfly, but to the long, patient process of natural selection, predators killing the butterflies without eye spots, or with less effective eye spots, over millions of generations, until the survivors are the ones who carry the most convincing versions. Evolution as an artist working in geological time, with millions of lives as its medium. Butterflies have ears of a sort. Several butterfly species have been found to possess hearing organs called Vogel's organ, located at the base of the forewing. These organs are sensitive to sound vibrations, though their exact function is still a matter of scientific investigation. Some researchers believe they help butterflies detect the wing beats of approaching predators, particularly birds, whose wing beats fall within a frequency range the organs can detect. Other butterfly species can hear through structures in their wings or on their thorax, and some research has suggested that certain butterflies produce sounds themselves ultrasonic clicks during courtship or in response to disturbance. The world of butterfly sound is quiet enough that it went unnoticed for most of recorded natural history. We assumed, because we couldn't hear them, that they were silent. They were not. This is a common thread in the history of natural science. The world has layers of activity, of communication, of sensation, that we simply weren't equipped to perceive until we built better instruments and asked better questions. Bats navigating by echolocation, elephants communicating in infrasound too low for human ears, bees dancing to convey the exact direction and distance of a flower patch. The more closely we look at the natural world, the more conversations we discover, conversations that have been going on for millions of years, in languages we're only beginning to learn. The connection between butterflies and human culture runs very deep. In ancient Egypt, butterflies appear in tomb paintings and have been found in archaeological contexts going back more than 3,000 years, preserved in burial goods and carved in ivory. In ancient Greece, as we've noted, the word psyche meant both butterfly and soul, and the myth of Psyche, a mortal woman of such extraordinary beauty that she became the bride of Eros, the god of love, carries in its very name the image of transformation and flight. In Chinese culture, butterflies are symbols of joy, long life, and marital happiness. The image of paired butterflies, or a single butterfly among flowers, appears in Chinese art and poetry stretching back well over 1,000 years. The philosopher Zhuangzi wrote one of the most beautiful passages in all of Chinese literature about a dream in which he was a butterfly fluttering freely, with no thoughts of being Zhuangzi, and woke to wonder whether he was a man who had dreamed he was a butterfly, or a butterfly now dreaming he was a man. The question is still worth sitting with. It's a question about the nature of identity, about what separates one kind of experience from another, about how thoroughly we can know whether our waking life is the truest version of ourselves. In Japan, the butterfly called cho appears throughout classical art, poetry, and textile design. Samurai families used the butterfly as a family crest, the mon, partly because the butterfly's metamorphosis was seen as a metaphor for the warrior's transformation through discipline and training. In Zuni tradition, in the American Southwest, a butterfly made in Palik manner is among the Kachina spirits, associated with flowers, fertility, and the return of spring. In Celtic tradition, butterflies were believed to be the souls of the dead. In Irish folklore, white butterflies were the souls of children. In Russian folk belief, the souls of witches might appear as butterflies. Almost everywhere humans have lived among butterflies, they have seen in them something beyond mere insect, something that points towards spirit, toward transformation, toward the beautiful impermanence of life. The science of butterfly collection has a long and complicated history. For much of the 18th and 19th centuries, naturalists and enthusiastic amateurs collected butterflies in enormous numbers, killing and pinning them in specimen cases that were works of art in their own right. The passion for butterfly collecting drove some of the early systematic study of butterfly biology and distribution, as collectors mapped which species lived where, and compared specimens from different parts of the world. Some of the great figures of natural history were devoted collectors. Vladimir Nabokov, the novelist best known for Lolita and Pale Fire, was also a serious and published lepidopterist and an expert in butterflies. He worked for years as a researcher at the Harvard Museum of Natural History, and his careful study of a group of small blue butterflies called the Polyomatus, blues, led him to propose in 1945 that the butterflies had colonized the Americas from Asia across the Bering Land Bridge in multiple waves over millions of years. This hypothesis was dismissed by many of his colleagues as the amateur speculation of a novelist who happened to like butterflies. 60 years later, molecular genetic analysis proved him right in almost every detail. The butterflies, it turned out, had migrated exactly as Nabokov said they had. Today, butterfly collecting for specimens is still practiced but far more carefully regulated, and the emphasis in butterfly study has shifted from collection to observation, from pinning to watching, from preserving to understanding. Citizen science projects that recruit ordinary people to photograph and record butterfly sightings have generated enormous amounts of useful data. There is something beautiful about that shift, from the impulse to possess and preserve, toward the impulse to watch and witness. The conservation status of butterflies around the world is a complex and somewhat sobering story, though there is hope within it as well. It's worth approaching with appropriate care, neither exaggerating the difficulty nor looking away from it. Roughly a third of butterfly species in Europe and North America have declined in numbers over the past few decades. The causes are multiple and interconnected habitat loss as wildflower meadows are converted to agricultural development, pesticide use that reduces the caterpillar food plants, as well as the butterflies themselves, and the disruption of seasonal timing caused by shifting climate patterns. The timing issue is subtle but important. Many butterfly species depend on the precise synchrony between their own emergence and the availability of the host plants their caterpillars need. As springs arrive earlier in many parts of the world, some plants are flowering weeks before they used to, while some butterfly species, responding to slightly different environmental cues, have not adjusted their timing at the same rate. The result is a mismatch, a butterfly emerging on schedule to find its food plant has already bloomed and gone to seed. But alongside these challenges, there are extraordinary stories of recovery and renewal. The conservation of the large blue butterfly in Britain already mentioned, the careful protection and management of monarch overwintering sites in Mexico, the the rewilding of agricultural land across Europe, as farmers and conservationists work together to reintroduce wildflower meadows and hedgerows that have been absent for generations. The butterfly is given the right habitat to come back. They have a remarkable capacity for recovery when we give them the space and the food plants they need. There is nothing you need to hold on to right now. Let your shoulders drop a little if they have risen. You're in no hurry. Neither is this world we're exploring together, moving slowly through these quiet and beautiful things. Butterfly courtship is an elaborate and often beautiful performance. In many species, the male establishes a territory and defends it against rival males, while advertising his presence to passing females through flight patterns, wing displays, and the release of chemical signals called pheromones. The pheromones are produced in specialized wing patches called androconia, tiny scent-producing scales that release chemical compounds into the air when the male fans his wings. In some species, male butterflies stake out positions on the tops of hills, a behavior called hilltopping, where they wait for females who have climbed the hill specifically to find mates. The logic is straightforward. A prominent high point is an easy place for both sexes to navigate to, making encounters more likely. But it means that the males are engaged in constant aerial combat with one another, spiraling upward in dizzying dogfights to establish who holds the highest point and therefore the best mating station. The Empress of India butterfly performs a courtship ritual that involves the male and female flying together in a spiraling upward dance that can carry them 50 feet or more above the ground before they separate, the female having presumably decided whether the male is worth her time. The decision criteria remain a matter of research, but wing condition, flight vigor, and the quality of pheromone production all appear to play a role. A strong, healthy male one whose wings are unfrayed, whose flight is powerful, is a more appealing mate than a tattered, exhausted one. It seems reasonable. Some female butterflies mate only once, others mate multiple times, and some research suggests they can selectively use sperm from preferred males, in preference to less favoured ones, a concept called sperm competition that has turned out to be remarkably widespread across the animal kingdom. The females, in this sense, exercise more control over reproduction than a simple mating encounter might suggest. Butterfly eggs, as mentioned earlier, are almost impossibly small, but they are also extraordinarily varied. The egg of the small tortoiseshell butterfly is ribbed, like a tiny barrel. The egg of the orange tip is spindle-shaped, almost like a tiny rugby ball. Swallowtail butterfly eggs are round and smooth, like tiny spheres of pale green glass. The large white butterfly lays its eggs in tight clusters of 20 or more, each egg standing upright in a neat yellow stack that looks almost geometric, as if placed there with care. The colour of butterfly eggs also changes as the embryo inside develops. Eggs that start out pale yellow or green may darken to grey or black as the caterpillar inside approaches hatching, and in some species you can actually see the tiny caterpillar's dark head through the increasingly transparent eggshell in the last hours before it emerges. The first act of a newly hatched caterpillar is usually to eat its own eggshell. This isn't waste. The eggshell contains nutrients that give the caterpillar a small but important boost at the very beginning of its life. Then it moves on to the leaf beneath it, and the eating begins in earnest. The diversity of caterpillar food plants is remarkable, and in many cases the relationship between a specific butterfly species and a specific host plant is exclusive in a way that makes both the butterfly and the plant deeply dependent on each other. The monarch and milkweed are the classic example. The milkweed plant contains cardiac glycosides, chemical compounds that are toxic to most animals that eat them. The monarch caterpillar has evolved the ability to not only tolerate these compounds, but to sequester them to store them in its own body, and then in the adult butterfly's body, making both caterpillar and butterfly unpalatable to predators. The toxins remain potent in the butterfly's body throughout its adult life. A bird that eats a monarch learns, quickly and unpleasantly, not to do so again. But this relationship has a vulnerability built into it. Milkweed, in North America, has declined substantially over the past few decades, largely because of changes in agricultural practices that once allowed milkweed to grow in the margins and roadsides of farm fields. The loss of milkweed is one of the primary factors behind the decline in monarch populations in recent years. Efforts to plant milkweed in gardens, roadsides, and restored meadows have become a significant part of monarch conservation efforts, and there is something quietly powerful about the idea that individuals in their own backyards can participate in the survival of one of the most magnificent migratory journeys on Earth. Some butterflies have evolved extraordinary relationships with plants that go beyond simply eating them. The passion vine butterfly, also called the longwing or heliconius, is one of the most studied butterflies in the world, and its relationship with the passion vine plants of Central and South America has revealed some remarkable evolutionary dynamics. The passion vines have evolved chemical defenses in their leaves that make them toxic to most insects. The heliconius caterpillars have evolved the ability to tolerate those chemicals, but the plants have evolved new versions of the toxins in response, and the butterflies have evolved to tolerate those versions too. This evolutionary arms race has been going on for millions of years, each side raising its defenses and the other side finding a way around them. What's particularly fascinating about heliconius butterflies is that they've also evolved an unusual ability for butterflies they can learn and remember. Unlike most butterflies, which rely on instinct and chemical sensing to find flowers, heliconius butterflies can remember the location of specific productive flower patches and return to them day after day. They have been observed following specific routes through the forest, visiting the same sequence of flowers in the same order, something that requires a spatial memory that scientists didn't expect to find in insects. They're also remarkably long-lived. Some individuals live 6 months or more as adults, an extraordinary lifespan for a butterfly made possible in part by their ability to supplement their nectar diet with pollen, which provides protein. Most butterflies cannot eat pollen, and they simply lack the digestive chemistry to break it down. Heliconius butterflies have evolved a way to dissolve pollen with secretions from their proboscis and absorb the protein it contains. This dietary innovation is part of what has allowed them to live so long and to become so intelligent as insects go. The pupa of the chrysalis is not as dormant as it appears. We've already touched on the astonishing dissolution and reconstruction that happens inside a chrysalis, but it's worth spending a moment on some of the finer details because they are extraordinary. The imaginal cells, the cells that will become the adult butterfly, exist in the caterpillar from birth. They are present as clusters of undifferentiated cells called imaginal discs, waiting, essentially dormant, while the caterpillar goes about its eating and growing. The caterpillar's immune system actually recognizes these cells as foreign and attacks them, but they survive anyway, protected by something not yet fully understood. When the caterpillar's body dissolves inside the chrysalis, these imaginal discs survive the dissolution and begin to grow, guided by the hormonal soup of the chrysalis environment into the wings, the eyes, the legs, the proboscis, the entire architecture of the adult body. Each imaginal disc is, from the very beginning, destined to become a specific part of the butterfly. There is a wing disc, an eye disc, a leg disc. The blueprint was always there. The dissolution was not destruction, but preparation. There is also evidence, remarkable, carefully obtained evidence, that memories formed during the caterpillar stage can survive the dissolution of metamorphosis and persist into the adult butterfly. In experiments where caterpillars were conditioned to associate a specific smell with an unpleasant experience, the resulting butterflies showed an aversion to that same smell. The memories survived the soup. Something of what the caterpillar learned carried through the dissolution, through the rebuilding into the entirely new creature. What exactly is preserved in those memories and how is not yet fully understood, but the findings suggest that the line between caterpillar and butterfly, apparently so absolute, is not quite as clean as we thought. In the high mountain meadows of the Alps, the Rockies and the Himalayas, butterfly species have evolved to survive conditions that would seem deeply inhospitable to such delicate creatures. Alpine butterflies face short summers, intense UV radiation, cold nights, and the ever-present possibility of snow at any time of year. They've adapted in ways both physiological and behavioral. Many alpine butterfly species are darker than their lowland relatives. The dark colouring absorbs heat more efficiently, allowing them to warm up quickly on cool mornings. They bask with their wings angled toward the sun, maximising the surface area exposed to warmth. Some alpine species spend most of their adult lives at rest, only flying during the narrow window when the temperature is just right, usually the warm midday hours. Others have evolved to be active at temperatures that would keep lowland butterflies on the ground. The mountain Apollo, an extraordinarily beautiful white butterfly with red and black spots that lives on high rocky slopes across Eurasia and Alaska, can fly in temperatures close to freezing. The caterpillars of alpine species often take 2 or even 3 years to complete their development, rather than the single year typical of lowland butterflies. The short alpine summers don't provide enough warmth or food for the caterpillar to complete its growth in one season, so it overwinters as a caterpillar resumes feeding the following spring, and sometimes overwinters again before finally pupating. An alpine butterfly might spend 2 or 3 years as a caterpillar, and only a week or 2 as a butterfly. There's something wonderfully patient about that. Years of preparation, weeks of flight. The global distribution of butterfly species tells a story of continents moving, climates changing, and organisms travelling extraordinary distances on tiny wings. The brimstone butterfly's range stretches from Western Europe across to China, a distribution shaped by the movement of the land masses themselves and the history of glacial periods that pushed species south and then north again as the ice advanced and retreated. The red admiral, a species found across Europe, North Africa, and North America, has almost certainly crossed the Atlantic Ocean multiple times in its evolutionary history, whether carried by winds or simply dispersing gradually across stepping stones of islands and coastal habitats. The idea that a butterfly, an insect whose wings would struggle against any significant headwind, could cross the Atlantic seems almost impossible. But the Atlantic is regularly crossed by insects on the jet stream, carried along in the upper atmosphere at altitudes where the wind can push them hundreds of miles in a single day. Dragonflies, aphids, and yes, butterflies, make transatlantic crossings regularly a fact that was only confirmed when meteorologists began taking seriously the reports of butterflies and other insects appearing on mid-Atlantic ships and island groups far from any continental shore. The wing patterns of some butterfly species vary dramatically across their range. The tiger swallowtail of eastern North America provides a striking example. In most of its range, the female tiger swallowtail looks similar to the male yellow with black tiger stripes, a beautiful and familiar pattern. But in the southeastern United States, where the highly toxic pipevine swallowtail shares the range, female tiger swallowtails have evolved a dark as almost black form that closely mimics the pipevine swallowtail's appearance. This mimicry protects them from predators who have learned to avoid the pipevine's toxins. What's remarkable is that this dark female form exists only where the pipevine swallowtail also lives. North of the pipevine's range, there are no dark female tiger swallowtails, because there's nothing to mimic. The two forms of the female tiger swallowtail, yellow and dark, can occur in the same population in the overlap zone, and the proportion of dark females in a population correlates roughly with the abundance of the pipevine swallowtail in that area. The more pipevine swallowtails there are, the more convincing the mimicry, and the more useful the dark form is. Evolution, working with infinite patience and an absolute indifference to elegance, has nonetheless produced something that feels elegant, a response to local conditions so precisely calibrated that it creates different-looking versions of the same butterfly in different parts of the same continent. There is something else worth considering as we move through these quiet facts together. Butterflies have been used as indicators as canaries in a coal mine, so to speak, for the health of ecosystems, because they are sensitive to changes in temperature, habitat quality, and the availability of specific host plants. Butterfly populations tend to respond quickly and measurably to changes in the environment. Monitoring butterfly populations across a region can give scientists a relatively rapid and sensitive measure of how that region's ecology is changing. This is part of why citizen science butterfly monitoring programs, where ordinary people record which butterfly species they see in their gardens, local parks, and wild places, have become such valuable tools for conservation. Every observation adds a data point. Millions of observations, collected over years, reveal trends: the slow northward shift of species as climates warm, the disappearance of species from places where their host plants have been lost, the recovery of species in places where habitats have been restored. It is one of the more encouraging aspects of our complicated relationship with the natural world that attention itself, careful, patient attention, turns out to be one of the most valuable things we can offer. Butterfly wings contain a remarkable amount of information about the butterfly's life history. The scales on a butterfly's wings are laid down during pupal development and, once formed, don't grow or regenerate. This means that the condition of a butterfly's wings is a record of its entire adult life. A butterfly with torn, frayed wings has survived longer, flown further, or evaded more predators than one with perfect, pristine wings. Wing damage can tell researchers, who have caught and released the same individual multiple times over a season, something about how long that butterfly has been alive and how much it has experienced. Wing wear also affects flight performance. A butterfly with significantly frayed wings loses aerodynamic efficiency and may struggle to maintain speed or maneuverability. For males that need to compete for mates, wing condition is therefore directly connected to reproductive success. A tatty-winged male is at a disadvantage. This is part of why the display of fresh, undamaged wings during courtship functions as a signal of quality. A butterfly with perfect wings is, in a literal sense, a younger or more careful one. We are moving now, gently, into the smaller and quieter details of butterfly lives. The very smallest butterflies in the world, species in the genus Braphidium, common in North America and Africa, are barely larger than a fingernail when their wings are open. Their wings span less than a centimetre. To hold one on your finger, if it would allow such a thing, which it probably wouldn't, would be like holding a flake of painted sky. And yet these tiny butterflies go through the same complete transformation as the largest bird wings, the same egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to adult journey, with all its extraordinary complexity. They navigate, however locally, to find food and mates. They lay their tiny eggs on specific plants. The females taste their way along leaf surfaces with their microscopic feet to find the right spot. All the same intricate biology compressed into something almost invisibly small. The largest butterfly in the world, the Queen Alexandra's birdwing of Papua New Guinea, has a wingspan that can reach nearly 30 centimetres, almost a foot across. Females are larger than males, as is common in butterfly species, and in coloration are more subdued, mostly brown and cream, with yellow at the tip of the abdomen. The males are extraordinary iridescent green and blue-black, with a yellow body. The species was first described to Western science in 1906, when a British naturalist shot a female out of the rainforest canopy with a shotgun, the conventional collecting method of the era. Today, the Queen Alexandra's birdwing is critically endangered, its rainforest habitat in the Oro province of Papua New Guinea severely reduced. It is protected by international law, and trade in specimens is illegal. But conservation efforts are complicated by the remoteness of its habitat and the economic pressures on local communities. It remains one of the most beautiful and most threatened butterflies on Earth. Butterflies and art have a long and intimate relationship. The butterfly motif appears in the decorative arts of cultures spanning the globe, in Chinese silk embroidery, in Japanese woodblock prints, in the jewellery of the Art Nouveau movement, in the tile work of Islamic Spain, in the paintings of the Dutch Golden Age. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the collections of wealthy Europeans were full of pinned butterfly specimens, butterfly imagery filtered through into almost every decorative art form. The Japanese art of kiri intricate paper cutting has produced butterflies of extraordinary delicacy, made from a single sheet of paper cut and unfolded to reveal a symmetrical, detailed butterfly form. The process requires absolute precision and patience. A single wrong cut destroys the piece. And the result is something that trembles and shifts in the lightest breath of air, moving as if alive, though made of something as fragile as thought. The Odilon Redon, the French symbolist painter of the late 19th and